Okay, so here to start the conversation, and that's actually hilarious. So here's two guys that well, you're laughing. I talk to you guys a little too much on a personal level, and we ramble about these conversations. So I want to capture some of those moments, but I'm laughing because the both of you are sitting here chugging coffee, and
Oh
the both
yeah.
of you get a little bit too hyped up and speak a little bit too fast. So, I get that. I think Manny's very passionate, and it
Passion,
might be
that's
the
the
blood in
word.
him, but he speaks very quickly. So I am going to ask us to slow it down, no matter how passionate you are about saving all the high-rise buildings in Brickell, Miami, right now behind you. But no, I'm really happy the two of you get a chance to meet and that we can have this conversation.
Awesome, awesome. Pleasure to
Yeah,
meet you.
great.
So
Yes,
to
still chugging the
paint
coffee.
It's my
a little bit
second.
of
So,
a picture for everybody. Manny, we've had on a ton of times. Manny's out of the Southeast, has an engineering background, an engineering firm, but focuses on high level consulting, forensic work. And Manny heard about you, Ed, and wanted to talk about waterproofing. But I have a feeling this is going to go in a different direction. And from Ed's standpoint, we've had Ed on, New York based. I would call you a roofing expert, but really a leak investigation forensic expert for the full envelope. So you guys are going to have a lot of probably overlapping and different opinions. But I'll let one of you start.
I mean, I think that's
Thanks.
great. I know that. Manny, yeah, right.
yes, sir. Yeah,
And
Manny's
you're
fine.
down. Are you down? Where are you based out of?
Florida, Plantation,
Okay,
Florida, Miami, Florida, Orlando,
the
Florida.
Miami area. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of feel. I don't know if it happens down in Miami, but I kind of feel like in New York, like it's its own little bubble. You know. I mean, for me, everything Miami is, oh, Miami-Dade, wind speed, wind speed, wind speed. And that sets the tone, I think, for the country, I think, like, right?
Well, when it comes to wind speed, yes, but even like more basic than that, roofing versus waterproofing. I think
Mm.
the IBC doesn't call it waterproofing. It just calls everything roofing, liquid roofing, vegetative roofing, etc. I think Florida and maybe even Miami-Dade County are the ones that start throwing in the word waterproofing, saying like you can use a waterproofing membrane in lieu of a roofing membrane if you have a valid product approval. I don't think I found, horizontal waterproofing called out like that in the IBC. So it's, sometimes it's all the same. I mean, what we've learned through conversations with Adrian and Elliot is we're kind of rambling and complaining about the same stuff. It's just where are the pinch points? Northeast is energy, southeast is wind loads and litigation, obviously. But as far as bulk water goes, it's all going in one direction. It's basically going into the building essentially.
Or we try not to let it do that.
Oh, we're trying not to let it.
Right.
Let me ask you this. If somebody were to ask, would you identify yourself as what? Well, I kind of know Ed, but I don't want to speak for you. Out of the three words, facade, envelope, and enclosure, which one resonates with you more?
I have most fun with what's visible. Once you do waterproofing, nobody sees it except when it leaks. So I enjoy the facades more, right? And I did, with the engineering background, when I started the company, this is really what we concentrated on. Even with experience, there's three types of glass, from annealed through tempered. There's laminated and then there's insulated. Now you go into the vacuum insulated glass. When you talk about waterproofing and roofing, there's so many different technologies, like to get all through it and all the accessories and all the components and what is compatible with what. I need a few more decades to say I'm as crazy about glazing as I am about, the rest of the building envelope, basically.
So that's a wild answer, and I'm going to put this back on Ed because you're talking about the simplicity of glazing, but the complexity of roofing and waterproofing. And your eyes are lighting up because that sounds ass backwards to me, but maybe it's not.
No, I understand what you're saying. So it's just the world that we live in. So to me, to go backwards briefly, to me, roofing is horizontal, waterproofing is vertical. But then you get into the below grade waterproofing. You don't call it below grade roofing. Plaza deck waterproofing. So, and there's also a little bit of a odd thing where it's kind of like 20-year versus 5 year. So waterproofing to me is like a 5-year product, and roofing should be a 20-year product or 20 plus.
And that's interesting. I mean, I haven't found a definition like that. And, when you start talking about waterproofing versus roofing, that we also look at it is there air conditioned space below? I mean, is there usable, habitable space below? Then you can't do a 5-year product. You're triggered into a 20-year product. Plus, in our case, it has to have a valid NOA. It has a valid product approval. I guess where I was going, Adrian, is going back 20 years. I think we've all kind of been in this industry that long. whatever I was working on 20 years ago as far as waterproofing and roofing goes, yes, I do have similar technologies today, but there's so many different players, so many different technologies. And even the formulations of each manufacturer change, right? So they're like, well, this failed before. I can't do that anymore.
Right.
This is no longer my workhorse. This is my workhorse now. And then, the whole tribal knowledge and kind of location bias, what you guys will use as products in New York are what's available, what works in your climate, and what can the guys install? Exactly the same thing for us down here. Is this available? Do they know what it is?
See, well, in Manhattan, we don't do any single ply. No single ply. Zero.
Yeah.
As soon as you leave Manhattan, it's all single ply. Yeah. You could go to, right across to Jersey City or something, it's like, oh, single ply. So we have this kind of odd, the market is kind of, I don't want to say specific in New York, but let's just say it's not forced, but it's kind of like it became something. So the very quick history, okay, my knowledge, my history was in 2000, everything was 4-ply, hot mop, asphalt, okay, and Johns Manville owned the market. Then the modified started coming out in early 2000. When I say coming out, they were probably already out, but they started becoming popular. And liquid applied technology started coming. And then there was this whole thing with American Hydrotech, and they were on every job. They had this great marketing campaign, and they went into all the offices, and every job went American Hydrotech. And then like 2007 or somewhere around there, New York City outlawed propane on jobs. And like Hydrotech went like down, okay?
They came to Florida.
But then liquid applieds, cold fluid applieds started getting popular, like Sika, Kemper, okay, and they started going in that direction. And then Hydrotech said, no, we're not going to stand for that. And they somehow changed this. And now they call it a melter, not a kettle. They said no kettles on the roof. They turned it into a melter. But then very quietly, the modifieds were just like coming and coming and coming. But then the liquids around like 2008 or something like that, the liquids are really popular, but they're all very expensive. Okay, nobody wants to pay for them. And I remember sitting with one of my old mentors. Remember Jim Ostrowski? So Jim and I were sitting there and like, oh, the liquid prices are coming in too high. What do we do? And Jim goes, I'm going to give Jim the credit. Jim said, well, why don't we do, modified on the flat, and then we're going to put PMMA, which is the thing that everybody knows now, liquid applied, on all the base flashings and all the penetrations, all the places that it's going to leak.
Yep. And
that system is now the system, the most popular system in New York. Probably, I'm going to guess maybe 80% of the roofs in Manhattan or in the Manhattan area are the 2-ply modified with the cold fluid applied flashings. And if somebody said single ply, they're like, no.
And this is so again, you're describing, something that's going to get an overburden. You're going to put a topping slab over there. You're going to put a roof over that.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So like you have in roofing, you have kind of like two families. You have IRMA, which is the inverted roof membrane assembly, or protected, where you have your pavers or whatever you're putting over it. And then the other one we call is conventional, which is exposed. So a lot of people save that for like your roof bulkheads or places where no one's going to go.
Correct.
So kind of the way it goes.
That's where we see single ply, basically. We see single ply in that top application, PVC, KEE, that kind of thing. Fortunately, gets me down to TPOs and things like that. But that's really, kind of where we differentiate. If I'm going to put something over it, if it's an IRMA, I have to go multi-layer. I have to do flood tests before I put in my overburdens and things like that. If it's going to remain exposed, UV stable, color retention, kind of put it down and forget about it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, again, when as we start talking, we start finding the similarities. We went through similar cycles of, can you use the burner, can you use the melter? Is it a big enough deck that I want to put something out there? And it's also, who the players are. You mentioned Hydrotech. Obviously, I know the guys from Hydrotech because they were big down here at some point. I think down there, Sika, if I remember correctly. They got bought by Sika.
They got bought, yeah.
And this is one of those things that's happening. Such a crazy merger of Henry buys people, Carlisle, Henry, Tremco's got all these other companies. So it's even hard to keep track of what was existing 20 years ago and what's it even called today. It might just be the same product, right? In the end, it's all about make it continuous, make sure it's compatible, try to single source it if you can, kind of deal.
Can I tell you something? You know what the truth is about roofing and waterproofing? They all work.
Yeah.
It all comes down to good detailing and, more importantly, better craftsmanship. It is roofing. Roofing used to be, you ever see the movie Shawshank Redemption? They're up on the roof and they're just,
Yeah.
you know, throwing out the hot tar. That was roofing. More layers, the better.
Mhm.
3-ply, 4-ply, 20-ply. Okay. Now it has become arts and crafts. It has become a skilled trade. If you don't do a good job, it will leak.
Yeah. And it's really, you know, as we know, it's the penetrations, it's the transitions, the deck itself. You'll be hard pressed to find a leak on a deck. But once you start talking about either equipment or transitions to glazing, which is where we would, you know, start talking to you, like, I'm not going to put a, you know, asphalt product going up into your glazed opening. I want to try and do something like a PMMA that then your sealants and your silicones can go back to it and not stain them.
So I have a really good question, like, you know, kind of on topic, okay? Because what I'm thinking is, I think we all know this, right? Where do the leaks occur? It's where the roofing hits the curtain wall. That's where the leaks happen. It's always at the interface. Do you have any opinion? This is just a little technical, you know, opinion kind of thing. Window wall.
Mhm.
You have your terrace. You have your amenity tech terrace. You have your little curb. You have your drop slab. You're going to put your window wall in. I say window wall, not curtain wall.
Mhm.
And you flash the curb with your PMMA. Are you a fan of adding a metal flashing in between, or do you like to seal direct? You know, have the starter seal direct to the PMMA. Just a question.
I have about 3 answers for you. All right, so yeah, because again, remember, I'm dealing with product approvals, right? I'm dealing with NOAs. So most storefront manufacturers, window wall manufacturers here are designing barrier systems. There is no drainage plane. There's one line of water, and that's glass, metal, sealant. So as soon as you say I'm going to incorporate a metal flashing, they will say absolutely not. It's not shown on my NOA. It's not shown on my product approval. So we then say, okay, we'll do liquid applied flashing. So that's
NOA. Sorry.
Miami-Dade Notice of Acceptance. So basically, just like you see like an ICC report, everything that gets installed in the building envelope. And in the case of Miami-Dade and Broward, it means everything: the walls, the roofs, the roof hatches, the windows must have a valid product approval unless they are deemed to comply with the impact requirements. Outside Miami-Dade and Broward counties, that clause isn't in there, but you infer it's still impact rated. So assume that you need an NOA, right? NOA. So it's become a great tool to protect, right? Because it got triggered by Hurricane Andrew, by all the failures and kind of, you know, catastrophe that we lived. And the proof is in, you know, in subsequent hurricanes, you can see where buildings are still standing. Windows are kind of still in place, even post impact. So it worked, right? But what's turned into is almost like a local, I want to use the word, can't think of any other word for it, but basically it's mafia, right? Right now, if you have a valid product approval, you're in control of the design because you say, this is tested. If you change it, there's a cost and a time impact. You better pick off the shelf, right? So that's, you know, a very long-winded way of saying we have to follow the NOA. And I'm using one hand because I've got my other hand in the cast. So you only get half quotation marks today.
Were you beating up a contractor? What happened there?
So my wife was going to say, I broke through a glass window. No, I fell trying to get away from a dog and I broke my wrist in a couple of places. So that's another story. Hopefully we have more time.
You should tell people that you punched right through the glass window. That would be better.
and it was impact rated, yeah. So that was answer number 1, right? And answer number 2 is I kind of prefer the liquid because, like you were saying, it's craftsmanship. It's much easier to be a craftsman in a fluid, even if it's a reinforced one, than it is to start cutting metal and soldering metal corners and doing upturn flashing. So if I can do that as much as possible.
And you know what? I don't know if this happens down there, but again, sheet metal, that's a dying trade.
Yeah.
It's a dying trade. Like to find a tin knocker that can, you know, do metal roofing, copper roofing, soldering. I mean, it's kind of dying. And I hope and pray whoever's listening right now, young people, get into the trades and, you know, become the next millionaires.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you think that, but I truly believe that, you know, the tradesmen are going to be the next, you know, group of millionaires in the future.
Absolutely. And there's a definite need because as a consultant, you end up designing around essentially the available labor pool, right? And when I consult for, you know, developers and architects out of New York, or I work with teams out of New York, I always say, think about the team that you're used to potentially working with, you know, these union guys with 34 years of experience. That might not be the team you're working with here. You might be working with somebody much younger, much less experienced, you know, kind of put in safety factors into your design that if a fluid applied flashing is easier for just anybody to do, just ensure you have the right thickness and millage, then maybe that's the way to go, because you're not going to find a good guy to do the sheet metal, basically.
Right. Do they have a lot of QA/QC down there? Do you guys do a lot of, mandatory inspections, or is it kind of just like, oh, you spec it and then see you later?
Yeah. It depends on, like, condos get a lot of inspections. I can't call them mandatory, right? So, for example, we do have special inspections for glazing, especially on a high-rise project, curtain wall project, you have to inspect 100% of the glazing. Depends on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions don't say anything about roofing and waterproofing. They do their own roofing inspection, and it's really just going out there, yep, the roof is installed. Others, I think Fort Lauderdale is doing that. They're triggering, and I think, I can't remember, Surfside and Sunny Isles, they're triggering that you need to do special inspections for roofing and waterproofing as well. So at that point, you have to do the in progress, the surface prep, the final, and you also have to do your flood tests by a certified lab, basically. So you have to submit your flood test report as well. So
we need that in New York. We don't have that. We just have whatever the client pays for.
Yeah.
So,
well, most of
like,
the other
if the
projects
client
are like this. Yeah.
No, and Adrian, I don't mean like walls, but definitely on the roofing side.
Yeah.
I used to have clients that would say, "What do I need you for? I'm getting the warranty. I don't need you."
Yeah.
Okay, and then what happens? Okay, your fancy landscape contractor comes in, drills 10 holes for the low voltage lighting and the the irrigation lines. Hopefully they caulk it. And if they don't, now you know where the leaks are coming from. But
no, they won't caulk it. They'll grout it, because they think grout is waterproofing, basically. So they'll put it in, fill it in with grout. I'm done. Walk away, and you come in, a year later, and there it is. There's your leak. No, it's not. I guess I'll clarify. It's not mandatory. So this is, a few projects that get the special inspection for waterproofing. Everything else is a couple of quality control visits. Kind of cross your fingers and hope that the rest is okay. The other part, especially in the residential market, is they'll hire a consultant if it's luxury residential. And then they'll come back and say, well, my roofer says I should do this. Like, well, why hire a consultant? Go talk to your roofer who's going to tie into the wall, tie into the glazing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, he's telling you what he can do, at best cost for him, basically. So it's always that battle as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still here, Adrian?
I know, Adrian, we're rambling, so.
No, that was, you know what? We just set a record. I wanted to see how long I could keep myself muted and have the podcast going. That was over 10 minutes. That was unbelievable.
Wow.
Sweet.
So I have a lot of questions or comments based on what you just said, but
Fire
on
away.
the special inspection note, what I understand, well, there's a definition of what a special inspection is in New York, or New York, 5 boroughs, Ed, as you know, versus when you leave. New Jersey has special inspections. How they're enforced, and then what's required to ultimately get your TCO is, different. There might be a disparity there. So in New York, you have special inspections around what might be deemed as life safety issues: welding, structural steel, walls, connections. And you actually you have an energy, a TR8, an energy compliance special inspection category, where you're checking about insulation and back pans and, air barrier continuity and all that, because of the energy implications of, the ultimate carbon output of your building. Now, how heavily those are enforced, I don't know. You need a special inspection agency to sign off on those line items to get your TCO, but never, I think, will you have true 100% site monitoring. So it's spot checking, which is, clearly delineated. But in terms of roofing and waterproofing being a life safety issue, how realistic is it that you're going to have a specialist there checking for it? And I mean, you've lived this, Ed. Is it, you have an air leak or a water leak? Is it a life safety issue? Should that prevent you from getting your TCO?
That's a great question. I mean, I guess, boy, and I do always preach safety. Always. Remember, Adrian did a post about that window going out 30 inches. Like, I don't agree with that. Some kid could just fall right out the window. I don't know. My experience has been that roofing was always kind of like, it always took the back seat. And it never really wasn't problem until it became a problem. And then once it's a problem, it's a gigantic problem. Someone said, I don't know how true this is, okay? And I always say, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But I heard that like 90% of the lawsuits in New York are based around leaks. Leaks.
Okay, I saw it in a book as well. There's a published book. I think it's Michael T. Kubal. He's got it. He says 90% or 99% of the leaks are, the issues are leaks. And then, of those, 90% of them are due to transitions, not material failure. So it's poor installation, potentially poor material selection, and poor detailing. If I could talk a little bit about the life safety question, a lot of what we talk about, and probably what we use today, is unfortunately sometimes triggered by catastrophes, right? So earthquake design, seismic design, obviously it's because we had earthquakes that people died and buildings fell. Our own hurricane code is because of hurricane damage, right, during Hurricane Andrew. Champlain Towers, unfortunately, in Surfside 3 or 4 years ago, that's triggered changes not just in our local ordinances, but how people see waterproofing. So now this is partly why some of the building officials are saying, I don't want to take responsibility for, one of my guys going out there and looking at, doing one roof inspection or one waterproofing inspection. I want a specialist to look at it. It will cause structural damage in the long run, right? There's no doubt about it, especially all buildings are poured concrete and masonry. They all have, steel reinforcement that's going to corrode, and they have PT cables, which are even more dangerous if they corrode. So that's probably where I see it as a long-term life safety concern, not an immediate life safety concern. The other part of it is, I'm almost sure that your code, I know for a fact our code, is moot on what it is that the special inspector for some specialty item needs to inspect. They don't tell me as a glazing inspector what I need to inspect. And I see some competitors will do anchorage. That's it. I met the anchorage inspection. That's the code mandated inspection. What about sealant? What about final tie down, hardware, gaskets, things that are actually making this system resist that hurricane, not just the screws around the frame. And it's the same for waterproofing and roofing. There's no dictated minimum number of inspections, layers, verifications. The only test is the flood test. It's a 24-hour, what is it, ASCMB 5957, 24 hours of 2 inches of water. That's it. You pass that test, you're code compliant at that point.
Well, Manny, what you spoke about, I don't want to get too in the weeds about glazing design, but the norm there is barrier systems. So SSG systems, a lot of times that are not captured. So would you consider a structural requirement to be doing appropriate amount of adhesion testing, structural bite testing, deglazing, reglazing?
That's one of the sections of the code has a longer paragraph on, right? So it has, and again, when I say the code, it's Miami-Dade and Broward's, high velocity hurricane zone, where they say if you are doing structural glazing, there's limits. You can't do four-sided in the field. You must do it in the shop. You have to get your certification from the structural sealant manufacturer. You have to have a special inspector go into the shop doing deglazing, doing your snap test and your butterfly test and things like that. So that's one of where the codes is most loud about what should you be looking for. And then there's the structural glazing recertification, which again, after Champlain, that's always been in the code where every 5 years you're supposed to go back and recertify that structurally glazed panel. And it hasn't been enforced because people don't know what a structurally glazed panel looks like after the fact. So a couple of years ago, they started now saying, we're going to follow the program that you have up in New York? Is it the facade safety inspection program? They have something. Yeah, they have something similar now for structurally glazed panels. So how much is being enforced is still little, basically.
Well, I was in Mexico recently, and I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate enough to now have exposure to a lot of people in a lot of different climates and geographies. And when it comes to glazing and fenestration, at least, you see such a vast disparity of what is business as usual or the norm in terms of, do you have a thermally broken frame? Are the units insulated? Are the units laminated? What is or is not acceptable, especially after being in Mexico. You can imagine what I saw down there. So, but if you look at these three zones we're speaking of, New York, the Northeast, the Southeast Florida, and the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, you're going to be exposed to high design pressures, wind-driven rain, wet climate zones. So you see such disparity when it comes to glazing design, but shouldn't the roofing and waterproofing at the end of the day all be the same?
Yeah. I mean, look, on the roofing and waterproofing side, I think the answer is yes. You can add in freeze thaw on New York. You don't really get that down in Florida, but you would imagine that the techniques should all be similar. So the products that are sold.
What I think is strange, and what I want to get to here, Manny, is the whole idea how barrier systems are just widely accepted there, but you go to other regions and people don't like having to go out and wet seal the interface details from the exterior. People want a pressure equalized cavity, at every stack joint. So why do barrier systems work there, but people throw up at the thought of it in other geographies?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Before you jump in there, Manny. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot more rain screens in New York, and I feel like rain screens are being pushed. And I agree with rain screens. You can go in, do your inspections on the AVB. Okay, do your inspections on the subgirts. Where does the rain screen leak? You put in your AVB, then you screw hat channels through it. That's where it leaks. Okay, I'm a big fan of Z-girts. I'm not a fan of hat channels because I believe that a Z-girt if you put the, the leg, and if this is your wall and you put it this way, you can seal all that. You can even flash it. I put peel and stick, not me, but we designed peel and stick over the top edge of the Z-girt. It's never going to leak. So I don't know. Do you guys have a lot of rain screens down there?
I wish. I pray for it every day, but we don't. It's all direct applied stucco with cheap paint. But I do want to, the question about product regionality, it's the manufacturers. I mean, yes, I go out, I read, I study, I listen to your podcast, but the guy that's knocking on my door saying, hey, I've got a lunch and learn for you, I've got a training, here's a, product demonstration where I can show you. And at that point, the consultants become the experts. The architect goes back to the consultant because, again, it's so litigious that every high-end project expects to have a consultant, at least in the design phase. So whoever's, as a manufacturer, is putting the effort to train the consultants, the architects, and the applicators, that's who's going to be in that region. We do work in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas, Grand Cayman. We have to be selective. We have to ask the client, who are the local guys that are doing the work and what products do they use? And then we say, from those products, here's the one we recommend. I can't recommend in Bahamas what I recommend in Florida, like automatically, right? I can try, but it's not a thing. Going to the question about barrier versus drainable, there's a few things. And again, I think a lot of our conversations go back to money, Adrian, right? So how cheap is it for me to send a guy in Miami to go on a swing stage and reseal the entire window, even with the inspector, versus how expensive would that be to do in New York with the weather patterns that you guys have back there? So that almost triggers that it's just more complicated for you to do a barrier system and have to reseal it every few years, because that's the reality of a barrier system. You're going to reseal it.
Is it? Because look at a precast facade. Look at all the precasts you're seeing in West Palm. Aren't those joints? There's two arguments. There's the sealant, a good joint should be able to last 30 plus years. Then they'll make the other argument and say, well, if there is a failure, imperfection, we'll be able to easily identify it, be able to go right there and reseal it and fix it. Where with your Z-girts and this, who the hell knows where the leak actually came from?
You're never going to see it. Yeah. So the precast is a great example.
Wait, but let's say you have a leak. You get on you get on the side of the scaffold, okay, and I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, right? But you're looking at, let's just say, panels and a caulk joint, but let's just say it looks good. Let's say there is no obvious failure. There's no obvious adhesion failure. There's no cohesive failure. Are you taking remember Bob Pelham? Bob Pelham used to take one of those little feeler gauges and put it in and start running it down the caulk joint. All of a sudden it goes in. Oh, there you go. There's your spot. But like you're hunting.
Yeah, but with a pressurized either curtain wall or rain screen panel system, I think it's a more challenging hunt, is what I'm getting at.
It is. But for example, here's where I take it. The precast example is great. Automatically, you're going to recommend double seal. We don't see a lot of double seals on a storefront system. It's going to be a snapped-in male and female unitized with a single seal on that, male to female.
You don't have the room for it, right?
You don't have the room for it.
You don't have the room to put two lines.
Wait, but in your wind-driven rain conditions...
Now you understand why we expect that in X amount of years, glass to metal, if they get gasketed because it was a cheap project, but these are smaller joints, right? And again, there's not a guy, 100% of that line seeing how thick it is, like to Ed's point, when you're doing that non-destructive pull test, that would be great, but you're not checking that 100% of the time when you're doing inspections, and definitely not when you're doing installation. So there isn't a built-in belt and suspenders that you have on a pressure equalized system. So yes, eventually the pressure equalized system, probably your only choice is to wet seal it if it failed because everything got done wrong. But if everything gets done right, it should last longer than the barrier system. And I was a firm believer of the barrier system because that's what I was trained to believe, for 15, 20 years. So, and I said, I pray for the rain screen systems because it's not something that, let's say Florida again says that they sell luxury. We're not really building luxury. It looks good on Instagram, but then when you cut through that wall, you say, this is just masonry with stucco and paint and a little bit of insulation on the inside. This is not a high-performing wall.
It's got nice countertops. That makes it luxury.
Yes, that's where all the money goes.
His background looks pretty good, right?
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Manny, in the roofing world, I was saying earlier, IRMA or protected versus conventional or exposed, it's similar. Okay, conventional would be your barrier wall, and IRMA would be your rain screen.
Yep.
And in my opinion, if you had to put down 10 jobs, I'm going to pick an IRMA roof any day, because it's the sun that kills the roofing.
Yep.
And I would imagine the sun is killing the sealant as well over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even your silicones that are, lifetime products, they get more brittle. When I've done the structural glazing recertification, sealant's still there, but the pull test that I do on year 1 versus the pull test that I do on year 10, there's different flexibility to that product after it's been breaking into some, basically.
Yeah, that is my one issue, I guess, with common North American window wall. It's how labor intensive it is and reliant on all those sealant joints around the receptors and the perimeter. There is a means of, we were talking about the labor shortage and how you're trying to encourage people to get into the trades because they'll become millionaires one day. Fine. Or you could say with facades, so many components and assemblies are going prefabricated. So maybe we need some of that craftsmanship or skilled labor in a factory environment and reliant on maybe a few people, a tower crane operator or spider crane manipulator on site to hang those panels and 3 laborers instead of 30 laborers.
Yeah.
So there is a means of taking some of that labor off site. But when it comes to roofing and waterproofing, is there a means of prefabricating more and more?
Well, for vertical, yes, obviously. We could get the waterproofing or the air barriers pre-assembled into the panelized wall. Horizontal, then it gets.
Oh, I mean, look, a couple of companies tried pre-applying roofing to the cover board. So you'll have you have your concrete deck, vapor barrier, insulation, cover board, membrane, and they tried pre-applying it. It's not, I don't know how much you're really saving. So I don't know. I feel like waterproofing is different, but roofing I feel is an on-site trade. I don't know how you can minimize labor costs.
Have less penetration, simplify the deck, basically. If you can concentrate your deck design and your mechanical and electrical equipment and help the roofer out, basically pre-design, make it waterproofable, just don't make it harder for the guy that's actually going to do it.
We have this discussion of if facade components or assemblies are what's more critical, the fabrication component of it, getting it right, or the installation. I think you can make the argument one way or another. It seems like on the roofing and waterproofing side, it's all the labor. It really has nothing to do with the product. All products
yes,
can
that's
work.
True. All the products work. All of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't sell them.
And they wouldn't give you a 20-year warranty. They're willing to give you 20, sometimes 30-year warranty because they know the product won't fail. They know they'll be able to come back and say, that concrete surface profile doesn't meet what it says on my product data sheet. There goes my warranty. Or I can find that they use the wrong primer, the wrong thickness, anything.
The secret to roofing or a good roof, it really is the inspections. Whether it's third party, whether it's manufacturer, you cannot rely on the 20-year warranty. Okay, that does nothing. Okay, you can take your warranty, take it, here it is, hold it under your leak and tell me how much water it collects. Okay, it all comes down to craftsmanship.
Let me ask you this. If Manny, tomorrow you had to start operating full time in New York, and Ed, tomorrow you had to start operating full time, full stop in Miami, who do you think would have a bigger challenge getting traction?
I think I can answer. I think Miami would be a lot more difficult. I think, New York,
it's funny because I was going to say New York. So basically it's the opposite of the grass is always greener. We've tried looking at New York and it is, I think any market who makes a big difference, right?
That's everything. Who is everything. Yeah. You could be the smartest guy. You could be a young person working in a big company and say, oh, I want to go start my own company. And then, and you quit and you're like, oh, I got nothing. I have nothing.
I think the answer is I wouldn't.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah. So for me, the answer is more taking from Elliot. What is it? Tribal knowledge. You're not going to make up tribal knowledge. Like I'm not going to learn what you've learned in New York in 20 years of experience, right? So I will never be able to compete at your level based on not just the people you know, but the things that aren't in the code that you've picked up through experience. And that's really where I say, when we do work in New York, we either partner up with people, we limit the services that we offer as well to the stuff that we know that kind of really crosses the border of, Florida to New York. Structural doesn't change, right? That we can fight all day. That the structural requirements are very clear in the codes. They're very clear in the material manuals. When it comes to waterproofing and thermal performance, sometimes it's a little bit more art than mandatory, basically.
And then also another thing is if I have products that I like to use in New York and then I try bringing them down to, so I had this one, I had the opportunity of working on the ExxonMobil World headquarters down in Houston. And they had these giant open chillers where they had these big block walls and they wanted waterproof everything. So I said, let's use this product called CIM. CIM 1000. It's like this bulletproof stuff, but it's also one of the most finicky products that I can think of. And believe it or not, you have to install it when the temperature is dropping. So I go down there and I'm talking to all these guys. I forget the name of the GC. I can't remember. It was a while ago. It was 2012. And I go down there, we do a mock-up, and he's like, oh, you know, he wouldn't listen to me. I'm like, you got to put in at like 6, 7 p.m. He's like, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Come back the next day, blisters everywhere. I'm talking like they had to rip it out. And he goes, oh, okay. So yeah. I don't know, like, I think there definitely is geographical preferences with products.
Well, of course. I mean, that's every product manufacturers. I've seen it enough now, whatever the product is, to be able to have a lot of success in a specific region and then say, let's go nationwide. Imagine that differentiation. I don't know how many glazing manufacturers or contractors do you know in Florida Manny versus the New York ones, and to say we want to now start flip-flopping and operate in the other market. Totally different sell, totally different system. And it is another kind of interesting question. Do you think it's more challenging for manufacturers to operate in very diverse markets or specialty consultants? Because I don't know. I think on the consulting, look at you guys. How many of the things we've been talking about, you know, there's slight changes, but for the most part, it's the same principles. Where you look at a manufacturer in New York versus Florida on the glazing side, like night and day difference.
I can clarify. We're not the ones that need convincing. It's the local client. So you've lived this talking to Nashville, Florida, New York. You assume there's going to be, you know, you're going to address thermal bridging immediately, everywhere. You're going to address vapor transfer, and you're going to address, you know, thermal performance. You come to Nashville or Florida, and thermally broken what? Why would I do that? And then it turns out that it's not just through optional. It's really not mandatory based on the climate difference. But then you look at things like we do work in the Caribbean, and at that point, it's, well, we don't even have a code, or the code doesn't say to insulate. And then it becomes, how do you convince a developer, architect, owner that, hey, this is going to be better for you, you know, performance, comfort, money, because you're going to spend a lot more money in electricity. But even the impact requirements, like every project we do in the Caribbean, it's a question of, do I need to make it impact rated? Do I need to make it flood resistant because I'm so close to, you know, oceanfront? And we say, why is this even a question? This shouldn't be a question. We worked on a project in Jamaica. And, you know, very ultra luxury hotel, they're shut down, they hope, until November because, you know, I think it was Hurricane Melissa or something like that a year or so ago. And again, there were discussions. We came in after the fact, and there's discussions of, does this all need to be impact rated? And it's so much more expensive, where I think you and I have talked about Florida. That's never a question. Yes, impact rated is just a single line item. Then you add on to that, do I do insulated? Do I potentially do thermally broken? Which is not the case. So it's not just the consultants that need the convincing. It's who's going to be the client when I get to New York that's going to say, yeah, but I'm getting, you know, X from Y, so I don't really need anything of what you're saying. I got to sell what they're willing to buy. It's like the musicians who play the music people want to listen to.
Okay, so we're going to end on this kind of rant, and I'm going to direct this to you, Ed, because Manny and I have this debate all the time. You know, Manny wants to come in and be the hero and the doctor, and you got to do this and this. And I tell Manny, like, do they even want that in that market? You know, a lot of it, like, innovation is adoption. And if you go up barking the wrong tree, you know, how far can you really get, especially as a specialist or running a business? And it's kind of like, you know, trying to teach a child or a kid, you know, I don't know, encourage them to gamble, lose their money, and then they'll learn that lesson and then apply it in the future. But like, you'll never get to that point unless you reach that pain point. For your clients, for the owners, developers, like, do they have to learn that lesson through a harsh project experience to be able to then apply it to future work?
Yes, absolutely, 1,000,000%, right? You have again, just going back, right? You know, you have a developer. Why do I need a waterproofing consultant for what? I'm getting a 20-year warranty. I don't need you. Then they have a leak. And then on the next one, they're like, oh, shit. Hey, can we hire you to look at our stuff? I mean, leaks, again, people care about leaks. Where is it going to leak, right? If you have the ultra high-end luxury condo on Billionaires Row, it's going to leak in the penthouse. The guy that just paid $150 million for his, you know, mansion has a leak right on the pillow of his master bed. Okay. And nobody wants that. But the developers have to have that pain. They have to feel it before they're going to take things more serious and say, yeah, I don't want to have that pain again. we're going to hire the right people to make sure this doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
On that note, thank you both for coming on.
Yeah, yeah, this was
That was
good.
a lot of fun.
Nice
This
to
was
meet you,
great
Ed.
fun. And yeah, I think we'll maybe we'll do the next one in New York if we can get Manny up here.
Let's do it.
That'd be cool.
All
Nice
right,
to meet
thanks,
you, Ed.
guys.
Adrian, I'll
Great
talk
catching
soon.
up.
All right, guys, see you. Bye.